week from Friday.
I'm now all in. I used to go back and forth.
Especially that last game. It's crazy.
Or
Great coach.
just Wilson.
None of us believe that. It's like,
First half hasn't come.
Thank you, Nick.
We didn't do anything.
No, just your presence here is soothing.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's roll.
Good evening. This is the Wednesday, November 13th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee, starting uncharacteristically at 6:30 p.m. as opposed to 7 p.m. We're in the Public Safety Complex, and there's also a Zoom link for those that may want to join us that way. We have what appears to be a short agenda, but there's some longevity in some of the agenda items. So we're going to move right along and want to start by welcoming our newest member to the Finance Committee, Jeff Wenzel, who was appointed last evening, sworn in today, so can take official role in tonight's votes and discussions, and we welcome you, Jeff, and look forward to working with you. I think I'd like to go around the room just briefly, just on the event. I think you introduced yourself to everybody as they came in, but maybe one more time as they appear. There's been occasion where we've read all of these, and there's no way I'm reading the zoning article bylaw to everybody.
Thank you.
Second. So Heather, you're up. Go ahead.
It is a short meeting, Mark, so no time to read all of that.
Okay, good.
Okay, so the first article we had was the lease at Lakes Pond parking lot, and as I mentioned last night, the select board meeting, more information has come to light since this article was placed on the warrant, particularly as relates to Article 97 that protects this land and would require going through the act of a special act of legislation in order to be able to lease it. So with that being said, I believe it's the town's intent to pass over this article.
So with that, I don't think we need to take a step to pass on the pass. So we'll pass. So Article 2, having to do with the establishment of an MS4 enterprise fund, more commonly referred to as a stormwater enterprise fund. So Heather, go ahead.
Sure. So this is something we've been talking about for a little while now, specifically as relates to stormwater. So stormwater in the MS4 stands for 4 S's, and I don't know the 4 S's, and I don't know if I'll ever know the 4 S's. But it's stormwater. It's something we've talked about during budget seasons past couple of years. It's an unfunded mandate from the state. It started a number of years ago, and we are in either the 5th or the 6th year. The funds coming in are specifically for that purpose, and they're expended for that purpose. If there's any money left over at the end of the year, it does not carry forward to free cash, rather carries forward to something called retained earnings, just like the water would, and that would go back into the program. What would happen is we would come up with a mechanism where it would be essentially an assessment on every parcel in town that was improved. So if it's just a plot of woods, then it wouldn't be impacted. If it's something with a driveway or a paved surface or a house, then it would in fact receive an assessment. They did this very similar in Rutland. There's a couple different mechanisms out there. Some towns have looked at it, and they've actually gone through the process of hiring an outside consultant, measuring everyone's impervious surface and calculating a fee based on that. Rutland took a very initial elementary approach, which I think is something Travis and I started talking about a little bit more, which is just the idea of getting something on the books where we say, this is our best guess at the estimated expenses for next year. We would need to raise Y dollars in revenue. We would divide it by the number of parcels that are improved in town, and then that would be the annual assessment, and we would mail it out, likely utilizing the Light Company and their assistance when other bills go out. I know one of the things that came up when we talked about this initially at the select board meeting was that we were going to look at some calculations to see if we can figure out what those initial assessments would look like. And with that, I know Travis is currently trying to put together some estimates using both our consultants and some other metrics, so at least we have some number. I don't have that for you today, but I'm hoping to have something for next week. If this does go forward, what this would mean is that passes, costs go up, right? So we had originally, a couple of years ago, Travis and I had talked about looking at firms to come in or contractors to come in and do the catch basin cleaning for us, because as we know, our fleet is becoming more and more aged, and even our catch basin cleaning apparatus,
Which we
or
just bought.
Machine itself is starting to be aging, and we're going to have to replace at some point soon. So we had looked at the cost of potentially hiring out for that, and the hourly cost of that 2 years ago is almost double now what it was 2 years ago. So there's lots of factors that go into this place, but it includes, having to do the regular catch basin cleanings, having to do, the reporting, and having to start doing some repairs and some mitigating.
Didn't we just buy a new catch basin cleaning equipment attachment 2 years ago? I mean, I thought we did.
I thought that was a mower.
No, we bought an attachment.
We bought an
Ditch
attachment to
Oh.
clean the basins.
Yeah.
The arm.
Yeah.
It might have been the arm for it, but it wasn't the actual catch basin itself. It might have been, to your point, like I always think of a vacuum and then all the accessories.
It's the clock.
Yeah.
So with the committee's blessing, typically we have a motion and a second and then discussion. Can we kind of reverse that and have the discussion so that people will be comfortable making the motion? So Heather, I want to follow up on the revenue side. You said it was mentioned at the finance committee, the select board meeting.
Like a water bill, right? So it essentially, if you own a parcel of land in the town of Paxton and it's not just all forest, you're going to get the assessment. The initial assessment that we would be looking at this, at least for the first year or so, would be the same for everybody. Just because I don't think we have the funding to go out and hire someone to come in and do an assessment and do detailed numbers. But over time, it would have the ability to look more specific. So if you have less impervious surface than someone else, or if someone has an extensive parking lot, then maybe they would pay a heavier share.
So my last question is, you talked about it may come in one form or another and report to one body, select board or another. Why wouldn't it be exactly the same as the Water Enterprise Fund? Aren't those elected board positions?
They are elected board positions, but, as we're currently looking at the charter review, that's something that's always a conversation, is what the structure is. So which positions are elected, which are appointed, and which roles do we actually still need as elected. Some communities, actually, the select board serves as the select board and the water board, and the MS4 enterprise board, right? So it's just, I think those are some decisions that would still have to be made. This gives the town the go-ahead to start putting those pieces into position and start made initially on this piece. It's something that we have time to figure out what the most appropriate location is for a oversight board to oversee this
Okay.
piece.
And then my second question, I probably should have flipped them around, but is the purpose of establishing this is to get a spot to put the revenue versus the operating, versus a line, revenue input to our existing budget? What do we see the value of this?
Yeah, so right now what's happening, right, is we are currently continuing to tax our operating budget for this purpose, and this number is going to continue to grow. We could very well just include this as an override and make sure the number is substantial enough that it essentially generates its own 2.5% each year and continues contributing into it. But then you're looking at, a couple $100,000 just as a base for this to be able to cover the operating budget funds. Pulling it out allows it to be separate, allows the town to kind of flex with the requirements, and if there's a good year and the requirements aren't as stringent, then we could reduce back the cost to the individuals.
So maybe the piece that I'm missing, and why couldn't we do an assessment if it was standard budget as we have tax income, we have water, or does it need to be an enterprise fund for us to make an assessment?
Up in the regular budget as opposed to having the ability to self-contain those figures.
I think I'm getting at, I could be wrong, but what I'm getting at is your statement was we might be off, right? We might assess $100 and it costs $150. Right?
So think of it this way. Every time, the way we currently do the billing, it makes it very, very challenging to actually figure out how much money we're pulling in on the current month's bill of what we just sent out. We know how much we pull in every month and how much we bill every month, but we don't always have the detailed report to know exactly how much. Like if we bill $100 worth of bills this month for trash, and I collect $100, it is very hard without going through every single account to figure out how much of that $100 was collected from this month's bills and how much of it was from prior months. The reason we don't run into too much difficulty with trash is because we've had so many years of doing this that oftentimes people eventually pay and we're collecting from behind months and it ends up balancing itself out. This first year will be a lot harder because if you assess people, you don't always collect, and let me restate that, you never will collect 100% of what you assess.
So Heather, when similar questions were posed to the water department, I recall them saying, if there's a surplus of revenue over expenses, they get to keep it. If there's a
80s percentage collection rate when you're talking about water and trash, so I would imagine this would be no different. And then you figure out and allow for abatements and everything else to come up and calculate the number of what you're looking for. And I think we can do that pretty accurately, even taking into consideration that the numbers might be, we might have to be a little more conservative, a little higher for the first year. But then the nice thing is the next year, let's say that there's no additional restrictions and costs don't go up too much for the piece, it allows the rates to kind of stabilize and stay the same, because we have the additional from the year before to offset it.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand. I agree with everything you just said. I just don't understand why you need a special enterprise fund to do that. What's special about this? What does the enterprise fund do to enable you to do that?
So this is a strong recommendation from the state and the other organizations involved to go with an enterprise fund, to have it separate, to be able to deal with it individually. You could do it, we could do it just like we do the trash, but the problem is that you're always sitting there hoping that no one tries to cut the trash budget, right? Because they don't understand something. So you have to wash the two numbers. It's extremely stressful every year we do the trash, trying to make sure that we wash the two numbers. The other thing is it's not supposed to actually make money where it's in the general fund. So we're not supposed.
I understand.
Yes, and it also gives the ability, so, let's say that all of a sudden halfway through the year, costs for something go up exponentially, or the state adds in a new caveat or a new requirement that we have to meet that we weren't originally planning on. It gives you the ability that if you needed to raise the rates, you can do it so that you have the funds to meet that, as opposed to the concern, which is if it's part of the operating budget and all of a sudden your expenses randomly go up, now you're in trouble because now you're going to have to pull from other items to balance it at the end of the day.
Just for the record, May town meeting last year, 2023, $14,000 transferred for a ditcher head attachment to clean catch basins. So we just bought it a year ago.
Well, we have the options of making a motion to approve, to disapprove, or to take no action.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
And here.
searching records and conferring with the AG's office, we never sent the bylaw to the state, or there's no record of that. So if you don't send a general bylaw to the state, it doesn't actually become law. It's slightly dated, being back in 2007, so it's a little bit late to submit a late submission, so this just cleans things up. The right to farm bylaw proposed is taken from the state's draft version or their template bylaw. I believe the major modification is just that instead of just having disputes go to the Agricultural Commission or the Select Board, they go to the Agricultural Commission if one exists, and if not, they go to the town administrator.
So Heather, can I say something the same but differently? We thought we had the bylaw, we didn't. We operated under the assumption that we did, and now we're going forward legislatively to make sure we do. Does that sum it up?
Sounds about right. Just give me 1 second. Hold here. I'm scrolling on my side so no one gets dizzy. One moment, I'm almost there.
Your screen's not changing.
Okay. It did now?
No.
Didn't.
There it goes.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't want to scroll it. I was told it makes people dizzy, so.
So Heather, under the special revenue funds, the Conservation Commission has 2 of them. Not unlike the Recreation Commission has several of them. The Recreation Commission is identified, though, as 53E 1/2 fund. How is the conservation proposal here in front of us right now similar to the recreation, different than their revenue fund? What's the clarification?
Sure, so, and I'd say mostly prior to 2016, Recreation, I think even Conservation had specific provisions as well as some other groups
To spend their own money that is in their special revenue fund?
So what happens with the revolving fund bylaws, the first step is to actually create the revolving fund bylaws so it puts the money specifically here. What's happening right now, as I understand it, is the stuff from the local wetlands bylaw piece is going to the local receipts and not going to its own piece. So even though they're collecting it each year, they can't really spend it. This allows them to collect it, hold on to it, and be able to spend for these purposes, services, supplies, part-time wages, other operating expenses, expenses related to the enforcement of the local bylaw. So right now they're collecting it, but they can't actually spend it.
Right, exactly.
Because it goes to the town's piece.
Right.
The whole purpose of having these things is to be able to spend from them for those related purposes. No different than, if you remember, we added recently the planning board one, where they can actually pull in money from permit application fees and in turn be able to pay for consultants, advertising, and planning board related expenses, where prior to that, they just didn't have the ability to actually do any of those things. They were doing interesting things where someone would come in, they would actually hold a flat check for the consultant, give the check that was already written out to the consultant to them, and then ask for more money for them to be able to keep the permit process going.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? It passes. You are limited to 2 minutes on Article 6 for $2.
That's it. Buck a minute.
So, in short, I spoke to the town accountant. At the end of the day, my Excel sheet was off by $2. It had a rounding error. We double checked with the state. They said we absolutely need to fix this. So this is a article for $2, and what we're doing to get everything to balance is just reducing the debt borrowing cost by $2. It's a fund we're not going to utilize, I believe, this year anyway. We're all set, but we're going to reduce that by $2 so that we're all balanced and everyone's happy.
Had a great show about this
Motion
in
to
the 80s.
disapprove.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, okay.
Second.
Any
Squeeze that.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes as approved. Article 7, Heather.
Larger ones. And just for follow-up on that, I do have modified numbers, so we ended up being slightly higher than what they should have been. I did check, and it's on my information sheet, which no one has yet. I'm waiting for the motions, but I did check with the town accountant, and those numbers should actually be $69,138 for each.
So, Heather, you made mention free cash a little over 600,000. Did we lose her?
No, I think she just turned off her camera.
So the actual number was 638,000, of which decision was made to leave 500,000 for the budget, which left 138,276 to be sent to either the capital depreciation or the general stabilization fund, and that's how dividing those evenly by 2 leads in Article 7 to 69,000, either 140 or 138, and Article 8 to the general stabilization up. None. Article 7 passes. Ben, you want to go to 8?
I'll make a motion to approve Article 8 for 69,138.
Second?
Second. Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes as approved. Article 9. Heather.
So Article 9 is citizens petition to amend the special act. So 2 pieces here, just to make sure everyone understands. The first is the citizens petition. So in Massachusetts, in towns with town meeting, citizens can get together and ask for a specific article to be placed with its very specific outlined language on a town meeting. When you have a special town meeting, that requires at least 100 signatures. And there was over, I want to say, around 130 signatures that were certified for this one. When the select board has already called the town meeting, the citizens petition goes on to the town meeting warrant automatically. It's the one thing that kind of bypasses.
This is not an us or them or citizens against them. It's just general feeling that in addition to taking a look at the entire town charter, this one in particular to be made.
One question I have is, does it change the amount of members required for quorum?
8,
But it's not
Yes.
up here, so I'm assuming this is the change. It says 5. I would have expected to see something, language that says, I don't know if it's percent written into the bylaw. So the bylaw probably says, if it's 3, probably says 2 required for quorum. Is the expectation that would change with this?
Yeah, so whenever something is silent and it doesn't say what the majority is to constitute, or what the number is to constitute a quorum, it's always, 1 more than half, right? So
Okay.
if you make the board go from 3 to 5, then the quorum is 3. What we've done in and that's pretty standard for select board. What we've done in smaller committees that aren't, something that's necessarily subject to MGL, we generally say it's 1 more.
Yes. No objection. No objection.
That's my biggest.
So Article 11 is the accessory dwelling units. So as many folks are aware, the state has a new law that's going into effect in February that governs accessory dwelling units and essentially overrides local laws and local rules that are currently in place. It will make it so that the primary dwellings with their accessory unit, or for those watching at home, they're not sure what that means. It's kind of like an in-law apartment, what we think of as an in-law apartment. Right now, Paxton requires.
Did we skip
that
over
those-
10?
Yes.
We're doing, she wants
Yeah,
to
we're
do
still
it.
I'm
doing
sorry, I
11.
missed that. I
No,
apologize.
no worries.
We were talking about that.
So right now what Paxton requires is that the main residence be owner occupied. It requires that the accessory unit is actually attached to the main unit. It also requires that it's no more than 25% of the living space of the main residence. And there's also a permitting process, especially because we have no sewer in town, to make sure that you can accommodate an additional unit. So the purpose of redoing this now in advance of the new law going into place in February is so that we have some restrictions in place, and so that we also are still covered for any units that might exceed those size limits, so that we can kind of think ahead of those pieces.
Okay. Wouldn't know what to ask.
Yeah.
So
Make
for
a
the record,
motion
I
to
have no
approve.
questions.
I make a motion to approve Article
There's a
11.
second.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It passes. Heather, before you go to Article 10, the original version of the warrant articles included a third zoning bylaw having to do with the MBTA. Do you care to comment as to why that was, I think it was fully discussed, but the Finance Committee may not be aware why that was pulled?
Yep, absolutely. I was actually going to go into it. So the reason I like to do the ADU piece first is so I can explain what's included in Article 10. So Article 10 has two parts to it. One part is the map, and one part is the rest of the zoning bylaw. So when we talk about, in this case, the rest of the zoning bylaw, we're talking about everything else other than the ADU bylaw and other than the originally proposed MBTA bylaw. So the MBTA bylaw was a child of the state, where a couple years ago they came out with the MBTA rural adjacent communities and a requirement. So because we border Worcester, and Worcester has MBTA or transit, right, buses, trains, so forth, we got grouped into this piece where we're rural and we're adjacent to it. Therefore, they had some requirements about the ability for the town to create zoning, not building, but zoning to increase housing stock that was higher density. Understood, we have all of our pieces in place before we go forward with this, and we're hoping to bring it up at the annual town meeting in May. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just in the
So-
event it's out in the public square and we're asked, we can add a little bit to our answer by virtue of what you just shared with us. Thank you.
Okay, make sure you do it verbatim though. Don't leave out any pieces.
I won't.
So the rest of so Article 10 then, what does it cover? So it covers the two pieces, right? So the rest of the bylaws minus the ADU and minus the new MBTA piece, and then the map. So I'd like to talk about the bylaw substance first and then the map. So the bylaw substance itself, a lot of it is adding definitions, cleaning up some of the language, making sure things were compliant, changes, like a lot of the stuff changed the state's definitions of things in marijuana. We did clean up some of the use tables. The use tables kind of say what you can do in certain spaces. Amend, the correct section to amend was the accessory use, because the agriculture use section only applied to commercial farms. So you had to fall into that section, being a commercial farm, to actually be able to take advantage of that section in the first place. So we do have it revised, so it's written in there, and then further conversations and thoughts, and it'll be discussed a little bit later tonight, is of having a further note where it's essentially allowed as an accessory use for residential, and then with the caveat that there'd be notice still to the planning board as well as to the Board of Health. So that will come up at the 8 o'clock meeting, but that's a change. Like I said, the rest of the things is moving some of the pieces around. Common driveways are now a thing. It's been something we've been approached on a number of times. Previously, they were not permitted. Now you can have one, essentially up to 2 residents on that piece. There were some other pieces that were cleaned up and some other allowances that were relaxed and consolidated. So that's the substance of the actual bylaw pieces themselves. And then the map piece, we're talking just about the district. So there's currently 3 districts, right? There's the business district, GRA and GRB, so general residence A, general residence B. If you look at the map that was, I'll call up the current one that's currently in place and then the current proposed one. That is going to be fixed tonight because there were a couple notations about errors being in it, and I'd rather not introduce the new one till the board meets on it, or the revised one. So let me just give me 1 second if you could. Let's see.
And Heather, as you're pulling that up, like Kettlebrook's, isn't that a business, or is that zoned as something different? Because that's not on the map you're showing.
I believe that, I know that's open space. So I don't know, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. That's more in depth than my knowledge allows. I've learned quite a bit about zoning and maps and so forth over the past.
Was the question, is that zone business?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but there's no way that, over there. Certainly not in any district, so it might be, it's gotta be open space or something like that, with a special use.
The only thing that proposed changes is from 122, from the.
Right, yeah, there's nothing anymore.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying that's not, if there are other spots, if we should show the town, and this is where the businesses are, because you would argue.
Way with some revenue somehow. You can't currently do that with the map we have. We're not allowing business, right? You can't say we want business, but we don't have any place to put business. So if we had an ice cream parlor come in, and they say they want to open a location, unless it's in one of those current red dots, the answer is no.
I didn't think the answer was no. I mean, looking at this chart here, it's a special permit. It's not a no.
Not for everything.
Well, for an ice cream, I'm picking on an ice cream shop. I don't know what's included, what's.
It is a no.
Oh, I
So
thought.
right now, it could say special permit, but it's only a special permit if it's in that red spot.
Okay, let me get to the table.
So it's permissible. So anything that's in the current zoning, the way it currently is, you can totally do it, but you just have to do it when these red spots. Otherwise, it's not the business zone. So if you look at that use table, the table of uses, there's 3 categories. There's GRA, GRB, and business. So anything that says yes, you can do it in business, either outright yes or special permit, unless you change this map, the only place you're going to be able to do that is business.
And we're changing a very large part of town to say, yeah, those are businesses, without understanding what some of these changes might affect.
Heather, can you show the map that speaks to the
Yeah, hang on one
Ben's
second.
words, not mine, the roller brush?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to pull up
Can I just
my
comment?
red line.
Can I comment on that while we're
Pull up
pulling it
the
up?
table.
So I get what you're saying. I think business owners are a little more strategic than
I'm
we
not
do.
saying a thing, I'm just asking for the map to be.
Oh yeah,
He's referring to
I'm just
my
referring to
sta- my
this
statement.
to Ben's, which I get it. I think there's business owners aren't. I think there's this perception from the comments I see on Facebook and things like this that business owners are just like aliens that drop out of the sky and land in houses. And it's I mean, they're strategic, right? They're not going to, even though you drop the roller down there, people aren't going to come in and just throw businesses in random houses. I mean, you're likely to see like someone, if anything happens there, I mean, someone has to buy a house, convert it to a business.
Or 3, or buy 3 houses.
Right, or by 3, whatever they do. Like, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen. It's not likely to be random. Like, whatever happens first, the next thing that happens is likely going to be somewhat connected to the first thing that happened. And
Yeah, but by changing the bylaws, you take any checks and balances away. There is no more checks and balances. So if you go and say.
except for the special permit.
No,
designation.
but if it's a business
Yeah.
and we rezone it, there are no more special, if you rezone it
if you rezone it, it inherits all those approvals. Yeah, I'm not talking about the special permits. Special permits will stay special permits.
You mean the ones that are just a yes?
But the ones that are just a yes, as if we go from the center of town down to the Worcester line, and somebody says, oh, I want to do this, and it's a yes, it can happen.
It can, but that would require that the person living at that address is willing to sell their home
Yeah,
to a business.
Well, that's always, if somebody wants to sell their home, you give someone $1 million, they say, okay, great, thank you. I'll see you later. So my, like I said, my fundamental concern, we need to get more business in. And what we've been told is it's tough to get a business in. I'm fine with making these changes. The thing that you've coupled it with is now we are making pretty much every house that has frontage on 122 a business district. That does not seem strategic.
I think the other option, though, you would almost have to assess every property individually. Which,
Well, no, pick an area, right? So all our businesses are in
Why
town.
not go to Rutland? Why did we stop at the sign?
Right, I mean, expand
but maybe you
the
would
businesses.
down the road. I know, right? That's Yeah, but you're going to find 10 different people with 10 different ways they would do it, and the people who spent the last year doing it, this is how they did it, and the opportunity to
I'd like to see how many of those people that did it have a house that's in the red.
right, but were all the people that have a house in the red, or all the people that are bringing it up now going to those meetings or informing the process
Right.
when all the work was being done? That's kind of the time to do it, as opposed to 4 days before you're going to vote on it. And I mean, we have to talk about it now, but to me, I think, I don't picture businesses coming in and just flowing through that. It's probably likely some point in that.
Do 38 all the way down to Spencer. I just, if your comment is, hey, let the strategic, let the businesses and the homeowners do it, and then give everyone the right.
Well, I would say Worcester on the Worcester side makes sense. There's more traffic, there's more accessibility. That makes more
Well, same thing going from Holden.
Oh,
Not as much, but again, yeah, go ahead, Julie.
sorry.
so-
Mark, I just want to make sure I'm going through the chair for this, but a lot of this was actually addressed at the planning board hearing as to why this area was selected and how it was selected. So, I think I'd encourage you to watch. It's clear that hasn't been watched, so I'd encourage you to watch that planning board hearing, because a lot of this information has been explained. I don't want to, I wasn't involved in doing the zoning bylaw rewrite, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know that Neil did a very nice job of trying to explain all of this. Particularly why 122 was selected as opposed to, the other major roads in town, because 122 was really the funnel down to Worcester. That's likely to get more traffic. When you say this hasn't been strategic, I disagree with that. Knowing Neil on a personal level at that information so that, we can have a good discussion about it, particularly at town meeting.
Yeah, I'll respond to Julia's, because I think she was, the challenge I have, Julia, is we did 2 changes at once. So we are modifying the whole table that was there. That's exactly what you said. We have actually reduced frontage. We have reduced total areas. We have made fundamental changes to our zoning bylaws as it relates to businesses, in conjunction with increasing the amount of space that could be for businesses. So so I went through this whole document. So from a strategic standpoint, in my opinion, and that's all it is my opinion, you do one before the other. You make sure that what you're changing from a bylaw standpoint, that you are now changing the way that we operate, what our restrictions are. You do that in a small sample, let people come in and say, is the town happy with this? Are we okay that the frontage went from 50 feet or 100 feet to 30 feet? Are we okay with that? Are we okay with some of the other restrictions on parking, off-street parking? There were changes in all those sections. So the town has not.
This has been painfully slow, very deliberate, very thoughtful, very well-meaning, very well-intended, driven by a number of people, not the least of which are the ZBA, chair and the planning chair who have not taken this on like it's the wild, wild west. They've been very deliberate. They've talked about process and still having to protect people from setting up a distribution center right behind our house. So again, a lot of good work and really good intended work has gone into this to produce a massive, massive document. What we can't lose sight of the fact of is that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and the picture out there with the map of the red streak is very concerning to a lot of people who don't know the things that went in behind to get that. And I think the administrator, the select board, the finance committee, the zoning board, the planning board have got to do a good story and be prepared that there's going to be pushback, because what they're seeing is
and the black is what was already there. So you'll see right here, for instance, restaurant or similar place for serving food or beverage. You can't do it in the residential. You can do it by special permit only in the business. The problem is that the only place that you can do it that's business are those 3 red dots. So if you want to do it in a house that's not one of those 3 red dots or another location, you can't do it. So it doesn't matter that it's a special permit, it's not the business zone. If it's not business zone, you can't do it. The other thing to keep in mind with going back to the strategic piece, there are a number of reasons that location was chosen, one of which folks need to remember is that we have a lot of businesses that are scattered already on that route. They're not in the business district. So if they want to do anything that improves or furthers or adjusts their current use in any which way, the answer is no. And I know there's a lot of things, for instance, with house on pros and cons and both sides and concerns in every which way. But think about this business. It's been there for a really long time. They wanted to do repairs. They wanted to expand the building a little bit. I'm sorry, they can't do it because they're not in the business district and it's not zoned for that. So that's the purpose of fixing the map in one way, is to make sure that there's actually opportunity. So we did think about all of these pieces when we put this together.
No, I shouldn't, I probably misstated when I said, strategic, it makes a lot of sense. So, and for what you're saying, but we went from a relatively small thing to, and I don't know percentage of town, if you want to pick a number. So what I was more getting at, and again, I don't want to take away from all the work that has been done, and there's a lot of it makes sense. But one way that you could have done it is pick the existing businesses and a few other spots, instead of going every single piece of property on 122 that had frontage. That's probably the more realistic statement. Was there are businesses there. There are probably some lots adjacent to them that might make sense, create another business district. But I mean, the way as Mark said, the way the document shows, it's from the Worcester line to the center of town. Almost every location that has frontage is now in the business district. And so what I'm poking at, and look at item 1, right? Item 1 used to be a special permit.
More engaging for a potential business to think about us. I mean,
I don't think
like
that
a business
reputation
officer
had anything
being-
to do with a map. Let's be honest, that reputation had nothing to do with how the map was zoned. That reputation had to do with the people that they were doing business with in town. Everybody knows that.
But even if it does, the way to maybe start is make it easier for businesses to get in, but in a more controlled environment. That's all I was saying.
So the other thing you have to be very careful of, and CMRPC warned us on this as well, is you have to be careful not to do spot zoning.
Okay, I don't.
Yeah,
So
Here we go, we got our zoning
that's-
well, I think if I can, yeah, so I think that's a fair point. And I raised this at zoning once in a while. I raised it recently on a request for animals there's been 3 different owners and 3 different sets of rules, or what would be accepted for animals. I mean, I do support this. I will say with a caveat, I am not a huge fan ever of changing zoning, that people move into a residential area and now, oops, it's business, peekaboo. So I will support this, but I think that's always a fair concern. And I think it's also, Jeremy raised a fair concern about why this end and not that end. And it's like MBTA. I mean, it's kind of picking winners and losers. And
To have the meeting is sometimes challenging, so I'm inclined to want to do something this evening, but I don't want to rush anybody into making a decision they're not ready to make.
do we have a hard stop at 8? Is that what you're?
We do.
Oh, okay.
We actually have it a little bit before 8. We really have a hard stop at 7:50.
Oh, okay. I'd recommend we vote on it, but I don't, if people aren't comfortable, want more time. I'm okay either way, do that or Monday.
Yeah, I don't think additional time's gonna,
And nothing's gonna change really
it's
between.
not gonna change. Right?
Is there a motion to approve, disapprove, or take no action?
I'll make a motion, to take no action.
Is there a second? Hearing none. Is there another motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
2 opposed. Any abstentions? None. Passes 4 to 2.